So this morning we're going to have an opportunity to have one of the two authors of an excellent new book that has just come out, The Business of Doing Good, Anton Simonowitz, and his co-author was Catherine Knotts. And this is a book that is available through Practical Action Publishing, directly through them. And we'll put a link when we put the webinar recording up. We'll put a link to where you can find the book at Practical Action. You can also find it on Amazon. And it's, as I said, an excellent book that chronicles the progress of a particular microfinance institution in Cambodia, AMK, during a really tumultuous time. As you probably know, Cambodia was embroiled in a very, very difficult war and genocide for more than 30 years. It had an incredible impact on the people, the landscape, the politics, all aspects. And so the recovery process of coming out of war and genocide and reunification, the withdrawal of Vietnam, and trying to put a nation back together was partially facilitated by organizations like Concern Worldwide, which was the NGO that sponsored AMK and was involved in Cambodia for many, many years. And then the story where The Business of Doing Good picks up is really looking at how a microfinance institution was able to pay close attention to its clients, close attention to the context and the environment that it was working in, and design a very comprehensive and effective structure to provide financial services to people, but also be a good workplace and be a model for what we should be doing in microfinance. In the classroom here in New Hampshire, we've had the opportunity to hear from a number of speakers. Dr. Malcolm Harper is with us now. Paul Zaleo from Grassroots Capital is with us. The day before, we had Chuck Waterfield on Wednesday talking about his wind down of microfinance transparency. And we got to hear some of the good, the bad, and the really ugly of microfinance. And I think what Anton and Catherine have been able to do is really be able to tell us the way you can pay strong attention to mission, strong attention to good processes and procedures, and strong attention to clients and what they need and what's going on in their lives. So I'm really very excited to have Anton with us. Anton has been a speaker at previous SMDPs, and so we've known each other for several years, and also followed the great work he's done in leadership with the Social Performance Task Force and Impact. And so we're really happy to have Anton joining us from New York City today. And I will want to point out that after Anton's presentation, as usual, we will have a Q&A period. So please look for the Q&A box in your WebEx module and console, and please type in your questions whenever you're ready. We'll also take a few questions from the studio audience here, the SMDP certificate students, and we also will be recording this. So if for some chance you're not able to stay for the entire webinar, or you want to pass this along, this entire recording will be available on the SMDP site in a few days. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Anton Simonowitz. Anton works at the University of Sussex at IDS, and is a person that is well known throughout the microfinance field. And I hope you will take an opportunity to buy this book and read it. And we're really happy to have Anton with us to talk about it. Welcome, Anton.
Thanks, Bill. Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you are. I want to start off by talking a little bit about my journey over the last 15 years or so, as a prelude to the book and a sort of lens to talk about where I'm coming from in the book. So the book is a story about AMK, a Cambodian microfinance organization, but it's not just about AMK. It's not the history of AMK. It's really a look at AMK through the lens of the work that I've been doing and Catherine, my co-author, has been doing, looking at how to build effective microfinance organizations over the last 15 years or so. So my journey started with a microfinance organization in South Africa, the Small Enterprise Foundation, where I helped to re-engineer the organization after an evaluation that showed that it wasn't reaching poor people. So they really changed the way of working, changed the focus on poverty outreach, changed the methodology, and that was really my starting point. From that, I was involved in a project that tried to make impact assessment more useful and work with some 30 organizations around the world. And the outcome of that was very much this sense that impact in microfinance is about the details. It's about the organization and what you do every day, about how you design the products and services, how you manage those services, how you work with your staff, how you build the right business model. And from that came this concept of social performance management. And some 8 years later, we managed to get the universal standards for social performance management, and this is now something very much mainstream in the industry. And the task force has some 2,500 members. So really, this is the lens that I bring to my work with AMK. And we were commissioned to write a history of AMK, but very much the book is not a history, but an analysis of that history through the lens of thinking about what does it take to build organizations that are effective at delivering on their good intentions. So I want to take you back even further in my journey to my formative experience in microfinance. I was working back in 1997 for an international development charity, and I went with the field agent into a rural area of Kenya. It was a really hot, dusty afternoon, and the women explained to us how bad the situation was. It was the middle of a drought, and the rains had failed 3 times. And with that, their livelihood had been destroyed. The crops had failed. So the women talked about how people were leaving the area looking for food, looking for work, how livestock were dying. And during the meeting, some of the women actually fell asleep, and they were really embarrassed about it. And they said, look, we're really sorry, we're not being rude, but we haven't eaten today. At the end of the meeting, something really strange happened. The women all started taking out money, and they collected that together, and they gave it to the field agent. He put it in his bag, put on his helmet, wrote on his book, and got on his motorbike to leave. And I said, well, what's going on here? We're talking to starving people, and they're giving you money. He said, no, don't worry, it's all fine. It's a loan repayment. Look, 100% repayment, everything's fine. So I said, well, can we go back and talk to the women and see what's going on? And I asked them, what's happening? You say you haven't got money to eat, but you're giving money to the charity. And they said, well, look, we have to repay this loan. It's our moral obligation to do so. If we don't repay, we're not going to get another loan in the future. And I asked them, how did you actually get the money to pay for this? And they said, well, we sold a chicken this morning. And I was shocked by that experience, and that experience has really lived with me for the whole of my working life. And what was shocking was not just the reality that poor people were selling food when they were starving to make a loan repayment, but this was an organization that was 100% committed to reducing poverty. It was not a commercial microfinance organization. It was a development charity. Their intentions were good. Their products and services were probably good, but there was a real failure in the organization. Why is it that that client officer didn't feel it was his job to say something about what he was seeing? Why was it that he was just going on about his job and he felt that he was collecting the money, it was 100% repayment and everything was fine, when clearly it wasn't? So that's the question behind the book. Why is it that organizations setting out to do good in the world so often miss opportunities to do better and sometimes harm the very people that they're trying to serve? The book and my presentation this morning, though, is not about failures. It's about the practical steps that organizations can take to do better. It's about the small changes in the products and services and the way that they're delivered that can lead to more effective organizations. In the book, we talk about 6 insights, and clearly I haven't got enough time to talk about them all today. But just broadly, the insights look at the clients and our understanding of clients. They look at the people, the organizational systems to deliver those products and services, and the business model for delivering on what we intend. So I want to introduce you now to AMK, the organization that is the center of the book, and talk to you about why AMK is an interesting organization. It's certainly not a perfect organization, and in the book we talk about a lot of the challenges and the mistakes that they've made. Neither is the book really a sort of a complete representation of AMK, because the insights and the way that we present them in the book are very much our take on AMK rather than how AMK sees itself. AMK is an organization that is reaching scale. They have some 400,000 clients, touching the lives of 2 million people. And they do that with 1,800 staff, 140 offices. It's now gone up to 1,800 savings and transfer agents. And this is in a country of some 15 million people, so it's really an impressive scale of outreach. But AMK is not just about numbers. They are really trying to reach right into the rural areas of the country. So they're now touching, reaching 87% of the villages in Cambodia. For AMK, it's also about reaching the poor. It's about reaching those people who are excluded from financial services. And 50% of AMK's clients live below the food poverty line, compared to 20% in Cambodia. I think if you know something about microfinance and about poverty outreach, you'll be amazed by those figures. Most microfinance organizations are doing well if they are reaching clients that are more or less representative of the poverty profile of the country. Most MFIs reach people around the poverty line, maybe a little bit below, a little bit above. So this depth of outreach is really impressive. AMK, in its 12-year history, has built up a really impressive operation that is providing a full range of financial services now. They started off focusing on credit, but in the last few years they've become a multi-product, multi-channel organization with a range of credit savings products, microinsurance, really innovative health microinsurance product, and money transfer services through agents-based mobile money, which is a network of agents throughout the country. All of this would mean nothing if it wasn't generating positive change for the clients. And AMK from the beginning has had a real focus on trying to track and measure the outcomes for clients. They have a research department, which is actually a very impressive department for a microfinance organization, and they conduct quite rigorous research. And this research has demonstrated some quite impressive positive well-being changes for clients over time. But AMK is also a business. It's generated in 2013 over $3 million of profits, a return on equity of 18%, and operating in a competitive market, it's now attracting both commercial as well as social investment. But actually, as I'll explain a little bit later, this financial performance of AMK, although impressive by international standards, in terms of the Cambodian microfinance market, is relatively low, because AMK actively seeks to limit the financial returns it achieves and plough back profits to the benefit of its clients. So I'm going to move on now to talking about the 6 insights in the book and highlight the key elements that we draw from our experience working over the last 15 years in microfinance and through the analysis of AMK around what does it take to build an organization, to build a business model that really works. So the first part of the book is about the clients. Everyone talks about a client focus, about the need to be responsive and to be responsible to clients. But AMK makes a distinction between client wants and client needs. It doesn't just aim to provide services that are the most popular with its clients. So let me give you a very practical example of that. AMK, like most microfinance organizations, puts an emphasis on the loan appraisal process. They really feel it's important to understand the cash flow of their clients and to ensure that clients are getting loans that are within their capacity to repay. But AMK, through its experience, has decided that just doing that appraisal in the client group meetings is not sufficient, and that they require a home visit where they actually go and cross-check the information they're getting from clients in the client's home. And clearly this adds time, it adds complexity, it adds cost to the operations. And from a client perspective, it's not very popular because, again, clients have to be in their home and it slows down the loan application process. And Cambodia now, with the high levels of competition, is seeing quite a lot of client choice in terms of the services that they're getting. And speed of service is one of the things that clients value very highly. So clients want fast service, but AMK believes that clients need a home visit. We make many assumptions about our clients. We make assumptions about who they are. We make assumptions about what they need. We make assumptions about how they use our services. So in Cambodia, it was assumed that rural farmers needed an end-of-term loan product. So a loan product that is disbursed at the beginning of the agricultural season and people repay after harvest. That in itself actually is quite innovative compared to a lot of the repayment products that many organizations provide to farmers, where people are having to make regular repayments even though their income is not regular. But AMK didn't just assume that this end-of-term payment was the best structure for the rural Cambodians. They went out and they did the research, they had the conversations, and they started talking to the clients. And what they found was actually the reality was quite different from the assumption. Firstly, they found that by having a loan that people had to repay immediately after harvest, they were forcing farmers to repay at the time when the price for the produce was at its lowest. Secondly, they found that actually the need for money wasn't just a lump sum at the beginning of the agricultural season, but that people needed money for seeds, for fertilizer, for labor, and that actual need for money was spread out through the agricultural season. So what was happening in reality is people were taking a loan, say for $500, spending $200 at the beginning and putting the rest under the mattress, and then maybe drawing down on that at different times, or potentially having that money lost or spending it for other things. And what's more is that clients were having to pay interest on money that they weren't using. The other aspect of the livelihoods that they noticed was that rural Cambodians were not completely reliant on agriculture, that people had multiple sources of income, that people had businesses, remittances, other sorts of forms of income. They also recognized that people's needs for money wasn't just about investment, that they had life cycle needs, day-to-day needs, health emergencies. And what AMK came up with was a credit line product. So this is a product which is completely flexible in terms of when you draw down the money and when you repay it. So clients are approved for a certain amount of money, and they can choose when they draw that down, and they only pay interest on the money when they have it taken out. They can repay when they have the capacity to repay. They have to pay regular installments of interest, but the capital can be repaid at any time. AMK also spread the risk of agriculture by extending the loan from being a one-year loan to a two-year loan, so it spreads over 2 growing seasons rather than 1. So this is AMK's credit line product, and it's an impressive product in that it really puts into practice all of this thinking, all of this knowledge that we have around the realities of people's financial lives and the product characteristics that would really fit with that. But it's not just about the product. We hear so much focus on products, innovation, new products, coming up with great new ideas. But so often these products never see the light of day, or they go through pilot phase and they never really implemented. And I see a huge reality gap between our understanding of the lives of poor people and the products and services that most microfinance organizations offer. So AMK's achievement here was to have the conversations, to ask the questions, to allow these products to evolve and to allow these products to become operationally relevant and to be implemented. So rather than, AMK started with a research department that was relatively disconnected from operations, but over time, the research department and operations have come closer together, and there's much more dialogue, much more conversation about the reality on the ground that the operations are seeing and the experience and what research is seeing. And that process of product development isn't just about a research department developing a product, but really thinking about the risks to the organizations, the operational realities that people are facing. So with the credit line product, there was a lot of resistance at the board level, at the management level, at front-time staff level. It felt like a very risky product, and people didn't like the idea of losing the certainty of the dates where people will take out the money and the dates when the money will come back. And there was questions about how the organization would manage its liquidity when you didn't know when people were going to draw down the money, when you didn't know when the money was coming back. But over time, through gradual rollout, through building understanding, through the experience of actually what was happening in reality, AMK came to realize that the product was really reducing risk and strengthening the financial situations of its clients. And this, in turn, reduced the risk for the organization. So the credit line product has become AMK's most successful product. They still offer the end-of-term loan. They still offer a repayment loan. But the credit line consistently has a higher repayment rate, higher client satisfaction, lower client exit rate, and lower portfolio risk. So it really has been a successful product and really demonstrates both this need to understand and respond to the understanding of the clients and to have the conversations to really be able to use that understanding to build operationally relevant and practical products. The second part of the book is about the people in our organizations. We can have great products and services, but it's the people who deliver them. So often in my work, I see a reality gap between theory and practice. When you talk to the CEO, when you read the documents about the organization, you hear one thing. When you go out to the field and you see what is really happening on the ground, you see something else. Let me just give you one little sort of side story, one example. I worked with one microfinance organization where they provided credit, but they also provided training. And what they said was that their strength was that they didn't just do loans, they did training. When I went to the field, I didn't see the training. It was supposed to be happening in the group meetings, and I went to 3 group meetings and there was no training happening. And I talked to the staff about what was going on, and they said, well, we're supposed to have 3 meetings a day, and they're supposed to be spread out through the day, but in reality, the clients have to get to the post office by lunchtime, which means we have to have all our meetings in the morning. So there's no time in the process to actually do the training. So the reality was that the organization wasn't doing this training. In AMK's case, they had an experience where that home visit that we talked about, which they feel is so important, stopped happening. The organization started pushing growth. They started pushing client numbers. They were really trying to become the largest organization in the country. And people started focusing on numbers of clients and amounts of money lent out. And because of that pressure to grow, the staff started taking shortcuts. Those home visits took time, and it was easier just to do the appraisal in the group meetings. management turned a blind eye again because the organization was growing well. The financial crisis hit in 2008, and there was a real problem in the whole Cambodian sector in terms of portfolio quality. But AMK didn't just blame it on the financial crisis. They went out to try and understand what was at the root cause of the increasing portfolio at risk. And what they found was it wasn't across the board. They found it was in areas where there was high competition, where staff were really pushing loans to compete with other organizations. They found it was in certain parts of the organization. And they found primarily it was happening because of poor loan appraisal, because these home visits were not being done. So in response, AMK brought in a zero tolerance policy for the home visit, and they fired some 30 staff. And that really ensured that this home visit is happening and that AMK really is managing what matters. They have this understanding of what is important in terms of the products, in terms of creating value for clients, and they really are making sure that they're managing these parts of the methodology. But it's not all about command and control. We can't manage everything from the center. This is a photo of an AMK client officer on the way to work. The conditions are tough, particularly back in 2003 when AMK started. The rural areas where they were working, conditions were really bad. You could take 6 hours to drive 40 kilometers. So how do we create that commitment, that understanding, that motivation in our staff so that they do excellent work in the difficult environment that they're working? How do we ensure that staff are thinking about what they're doing so that if they see a situation such as the one I talked about in Kenya, that they tell us as managers what's going on. They don't just do their job without thinking. So for AMK, it starts with making sure that staff feel valued. So the pay and benefits for AMK are relatively good, particularly for the lower levels of staff. They have reasonable salaries, but they also have health insurance, they have education support, they have medical aid. But more than that, AMK has really challenged the hierarchy that is so common in Cambodia and Southeast Asia to try to create a situation where conversations take place between staff and across levels. So when you go into the AMK office, you can't tell who is the boss and who is a junior member of staff. Everybody wears the same uniform. People call each other brother and sister rather than sir. When the boss walks in, nobody stands up. When I went out to the field with senior management to talk to clients, the driver sat with us at lunch when we stopped for lunch. The driver and the CEO get the same per diem. The driver stayed with us in the same hotel. There was none of this dropping the management off at the smart hotel and the driver goes off somewhere else. AMK also has structures in place to encourage these conversations. So they have 360-degree appraisals. They have an open house structure so that the senior management go out to all the branches in the organization twice a year. And this is an opportunity for staff to raise questions, to make suggestions, for management to communicate what's happening in the organization, and really a place for dialogue. So AMK has created this organizational culture where people are thinking, where people are talking, where the purpose of the organization is really clear and is really being discussed. At the board level, this happens as well. So AMK has a social performance committee of the board. And this is a committee that meets for a full day before every board meeting. And the job of the committee is really to challenge the organization to think from a client perspective. They review the information coming from the research department. They look at the decisions the organization is planning to take at the board meeting, and they analyze that and they raise questions. And what's interesting about the Social Performance Committee is that rather than being a committee that is marginal to the organization, attended by a few people, it's become something that all of the management committee and all of the board regularly attend because they really value those conversations. So the third part of the book is about how do we build a business model that works? How do we ensure that our vision for what is possible is not constrained by conventional wisdom? So often we hear of organizations that don't do things because it's seen as difficult or not possible. So the conventional wisdom when AMK was starting in 2003 was that it wasn't possible to have a sustainable microfinance organization that could reach out to poor people. So all the microfinance organizations in Cambodia focused first on the areas close to the towns, the easy to reach parts of the country. AMK instead decided that it would start with the most remote and the most rural parts of the country. This motivation to reach out to the poor really was driven by concern worldwide, and concern remained on the board of AMK and really brought this strong poverty focus to the organization. So AMK went out to parts of Cambodia where the infrastructure was really not there. And their aim was, as the CEO at the time said, was to become king of the dirt roads. And this really wasn't easy, clearly. And they had to build the business model by doing things such as increasing productivity. So AMK's productivity at one stage was almost double the productivity of other organizations. They were serving some 900 clients per client officer compared to 400 or 500 for other organizations. They made changes in the methodology. They streamlined things. They really drove for efficiency. They used the local structure in the community, the village bank presidents, to support the work. And what's impressive about AMK is that they managed to build this. So within 18 months, they became sustainable. And I think the key thing here is that they started with this vision for what they wanted to achieve, and they set out to deliver it, rather than starting out with a vision of what they thought was possible. The other distinction that we make in this book is between the business model and the business case. So clearly there is a sweet spot between what's good for clients and what's good for the institution. And the whole focus on client centricity really builds on that. It really makes the case to say if you focus on your clients, if you do what's right for your clients, it's going to be good for your business. And that's the sort of win-win. But that sweet spot is not always there. And it's important to say that what's good for the clients is not always going to be the most profitable course of action for the organization. But there can be a business model that works. And if you increase the time horizon, so you're not just talking about what's going to get the highest return on equity at the end of the year for your investors, if you change that time horizon, things look differently. So if you look at AMK now, its business decision in 2003 to focus on the most remote parts of the country didn't make business sense. It wasn't a profitable strategy. But now that AMK is the largest organization in an incredibly competitive and, in some parts, oversaturated market, AMK has been able to grow in areas where there was very little competition to start with. It's built up a lot of customer loyalty. It has very low, very high client retention rates compared to other organizations. And it has the platform to start adding value through other financial services. So AMK's growth strategy now is not particularly to focus on adding more clients or giving out larger amounts of money. It's really about the value created through the savings, through the insurance, through the remittances. And that is seen to be actually a very profitable strategy, which is why commercial investors are now interested in coming into AMK. So over a 10-year period, actually, what was not a good business strategy seems like it possibly was a good business strategy. The final part of the book looks at the historical perspective and how that business model that works today needs to adapt and to change to a changing landscape. If you look at Cambodia today, it's a very, very different country to what it was in 2003. and even more different to what it was when the Concern program started in 1993. The regulation has changed massively. The competition has changed. AMK's capacity as an organization has changed. Technology now allows for mobile agent banking. So we often think in terms of products and how we scale products. But I think one of the key messages in this book is about that we need to move beyond good products to good organizations. And a good organization is one that is very much in touch with its clients, is in touch with its own capacity as an organization, and is in touch with the environment and the conditions in which it's working. So take, for example, savings. AMK had always wanted to provide savings to its clients. Its vision was always around the livelihood needs of its clients, and savings was part of that. But it took 10 years until AMK got to the stage where it was in a position to be able to provide effective savings products. Partly because of its capacity, partly because of regulation, partly because of technology. So I want to close by a reflection of the CEO of AMK. I met with him after writing the book, and I was asking him about the challenges of the financial crisis and the extent to which AMK had learnt the lessons from the loss of quality that they had at that time, and whether AMK would be in the position to better face those challenges when they happened in the future. And he laughed at me. He said, look, these things are never going to happen again. The market has changed. The organization has changed. We are a completely different organization now to how we were then. And I suppose my reflection is that AMK may not face the same challenges in the future, but the business model that it's built, this customer focus, this understanding of how it delivers and manages what matters, there's conversations that are apparent in the organization, this focus on mission and how to deliver that, puts AMK in a position where it's better able to face whatever challenge comes in the future. So that's a very quick summary of the book, and I do hope that you will read the book, and I'm very looking forward to discussion and questions now. So thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Anton. I think I will, since we have in our midst today Dr. Malcolm Harper, I think I'm going to ask him to come up to the microphone and ask the first question.
Thank you, Anton, very much for that, and thank you, Bill, for giving me this privilege. Lots of questions. Tanmay, who I still consider as kind of one of the main builders of Tanmay Chetan, who's from India, actually, used to work for us in MCRIL. We were sorry to leave him, and of course he's done great things. In fact, I saw him just the other day. I didn't realize that he was now chair. Is he still chair or not?
He's chair of the board of AMK, yeah.
But I've got a list of 5 questions here. Let me ask, related to the discussion before you joined us, Anton, about the crisis in Andhra Pradesh and the trade-off, or what you were calling it, the sweet spot between making money and doing good. And in a way, that's, of course, the title of your book. You mentioned an 18% return on equity, which is not very high by microfinance standards, or indeed by, never mind, other corporate standards, which is perhaps a good thing. But has anybody made a lot of money out of AMK? And does anybody stand to make a lot of money out of AMK? And if not, how did you persuade people? How did they, sorry, not you, of course, how did Tanmay and others persuade people to invest money in it? Or is it purely social do-good capital?
Okay. Sorry, Malcolm, you said you had 5 questions. You want to ask them?
Yes. Shall I
one
list
at a
them
time?
all? Or because I
okay, let me answer this one first. So yes, I mean by Cambodian standards, AMK's return on equity is low. I was talking to another MFI that is considered to be relatively poverty focused in Cambodia. Their average loan size is double the size of AMK's, and their return on equity is double, 35%. AMK has actively managed that, so they have a target return on equity of between, I think it's 15 and 18%, and they have incentives for the CEO, where essentially the CEO gets his bonus if he hits a certain level of return on equity, and then he loses his bonus if he goes too high. So they very much are aiming to manage that sweet spot. They also have a commitment that if the profits are what they would call excessive over a number of years, then those are ploughed back into new products and services or lowering interest rates, something to benefit the clients. So your question, has anyone made some money? I mean, yes, Concern Worldwide was the founder of AMK and owned all of the shares until they sold to Agora, and they made money. Well, they certainly sold their shares for money. I'm not sure exactly how much.
Agora, of course, part promoted by Tanmay.
Yes, Tanmay is so yes. So
I know Tanmay very well, and I love him dearly. Is there a bit of an SKS lurking there or not?
I mean, you can't always predict anything, but I mean, essentially, Concern came into AMK. It was one of the, as I said, it was the only organisation that really stuck with the MFI they created, and they were, I would say, obsessed by the risk of mission drift. So very much from the beginning, they were very focused on the sort of the mission side of things. They held on to their shares until they got to a stage where they recognised that they just couldn't support the organisation, that it didn't make sense for them to be shareholders. So they were very cautious and careful about who they sold to. So Agora was set up by one of the organisation that had put in the money to Concern that funded AMK. So it's very much an extension of Concern's interest. And certainly also AMK has been very, in the last couple of years, they brought on a number of new investors, and the conversations and the process of selecting new investors has been very laborious, and very much that social mission has been part of it. But I mean, no, I mean, the social investors are all making money. I mean, they're getting an 18% return on equity. The commercial investor that's come into AMK sees AMK as a purely commercial investment, but they recognise that the business model is founded on outreach to large numbers of people, including poor people in Cambodia, and is founded on creating value for the clients, and that's where they see it. What are the risks in terms of AMK becoming another SKS? Who knows, to be honest. I would say that these are risks that they are very much aware of, and I certainly didn't see any sign now that this is something that's happening. But obviously, as you start opening up to investors, you are always at the mercy of those investors to some extent.
I don't want to ask all 5 questions because perhaps there are other questions, but may I just ask one other which relates to very much the clients? I often say, I haven't said it to the group in front of me here, but I will say it now, that those of you, which looks about everybody, even Bill, who are younger than I am, much younger, for God's sake, don't plan on working on poverty alleviation for the rest of your lives, because like smallpox, poverty should be done long before you retire. Smallpox was eliminated, okay? So there's not many careers in getting rid of smallpox anymore. Poverty is like smallpox. It's not something, in spite of what the Bible says, that need always to be with us. I don't often criticize Jesus Christ, but I don't like it when he says the poor you shall always have with you, because they're not with everybody or with every country anymore. And Cambodia, of course, is a rapidly developing country. It has its problems, I think. I haven't been there for many years. But one thing I don't like about microfinance is the sense that it is a ghetto for the poor, that it keeps you poor, or at least likes you to be poor because you remain as a client. What does AMK do about either helping its clients to graduate and handing them over to the pucker banks such as you or I bank with across the road, or perhaps itself moving to become that pucker bank so that people will stay with it even when they become as rich as you or I are?
Yeah, I mean, I would say very much it's the second part. I mean, if you look at how microfinance has evolved in Cambodia, in a sense, the microfinance sector is replacing the banking sector. I mean, you are with the deposit taking regulations, you can get the services that people need. They can get from microfinance organisations. So AMK has recently, in its move to become a deposit taking agent organisation, they have a two-pronged strategy. So the one is partly to upgrade the branches to provide branch-based services and to provide the agent banking service. So what they don't do, like many organizations, is differentiate between customers. So if you're an AMK customer, you can access exactly the same products and services in the branch as you can through an agent. So if you take your agent banking card and you go to a branch, you can access the service in exactly the same way in any branch or any agent in the country. So they see themselves, it's a multi-channel, multi-product, multi-channel organization, but it's not differentiating between customers and providing.
If I went to live in Cambodia, and I wouldn't mind either, I love the place, might I choose to bank with AMK?
You might. I mean, they have very good rates of interest on dollar accounts. So.
And I can receive money from England and stuff. Could I?
Well, I'm not sure.
It would be inconceivable for me to bank with the Indian MFIs I'm familiar with. It's just not that sort of something that a relatively well-off foreigner does. So I wonder if AMK has reached that stage, or perhaps plans in 5 years to do so.
Well, if you look at the picture on my last slide,
I dislike that picture enormously. It's just like the Spandana head office in Hyderabad. You know what happened to them, but
yeah. So I mean, actually, if you look at, I mean, actually, one of my questions about going to AMK was the sense of were they becoming like all the other MFIs? When you go into any small town in Cambodia, there's a row of buildings that look like this, and they are the MFIs. Well, there's the MFIs plus a Accredited Bank, which was the first MFI, which is now a commercial bank. I mean, I think you are. I'm seeing a contradiction in your question in some way. That.
No, you're right. Very right.
To provide the services that people want, but once you become a deposit-taking institution, people need that sense of security, and that AMK has had to upgrade its offices from sort of side streets, small, run-down-looking buildings to much more professional-looking buildings, and that creates a tension and a sense of a risk of change in organizational culture, an expectation from staff, a sense of we becoming a bank. And when I first went when I arrived, they were doing a marketing campaign in the urban area for their ATMs, and my reaction was, how is this a bank for the poor? And AMK's vision actually is that I mean, they are targeting much lower income people in the urban areas compared to a lot of organizations, but in order to be able to provide saving services throughout the country, they need to build up this infrastructure. They can't just do it through agent banking. So their vision is to have agents throughout the whole country in 2 years' time. they are also constantly looking at how to upgrade and improve their products and services. So their credit line products, now that they're getting this agent banking, they're looking at developing essentially a credit card for clients, which would be, well, a combined savings / credit card. So it would be an account that clients would be able to save money onto through the agent bankers wherever they wanted to, whenever they wanted to, and to get interest on the savings, but then also to draw down money as a credit line on that same card. So very much that I think my main answer is that to be able to provide improving products and services, AMK is certainly upgrading itself as an organisation and is becoming more like a bank. But its focus, the discussions at the board level, its reason for doing all of this is to better serve its core clients. And if you look at most microfinance organizations, they have their group lending and then they have their individual lending, and all of the innovation and the good, the sort of product characteristics that people really need and the flexibility comes for the individual clients, and the group clients are second-rate clients. For AMK, this is all focused on how do you build this for the group clients, leveraging the services that are being provided for others, and there's not a two-tier system. So as people become less poor, they continue using the same services.
So, Anton, we have a question actually from a participant who is listening on the webinar. Her name is Pamela Williams, and she asked the question, does research support that these principles apply domestically too? I assume she means domestically in the United States or in a developed world scenario. Please provide references to such research if you have it, which we can get back to her on. But are these universal, these principles? Do you think they would apply to microfinance institutions working in just about any economic situation?
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is that they would apply to any organization, not just to any microfinance organization. So to an organization that is working, providing services in the marketplace and is trying to balance the commercial and the social, I would say that these are very much a universal principles. I don't have research, but I mean, certainly I've worked with a financial inclusion organization in the UK that has developed a financial health well-being diagnostic, which is very much along these lines of these principles. I've been talking with Acumen, the social entrepreneur investor, which works in a range of sectors, and they very much see this resonating with their work. So absolutely, I would say that these are principles for organizations in general, not just for international microfinance.
Great, excellent. We have a question from one of our students here in the classroom, Mr. Pawan Chugh. He's actually working in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, Canada, but originally from New Delhi. So, Pawan?
Thank you for the excellent presentation. My question is actually on bad debts. Like you mentioned about group financing and individual financing. What's your bad debt rates for both of them? And how does group financing covers the individual financing, or how do you deal with it? Thank you.
Yes. So AMK's portfolio at risk is around, I think it's about 0.3%. Historically, bad debt in Cambodia is very low, even for individual lending, and partly that is a cultural issue. There's a real sense of sort of the moral obligation of repaying loans. I think partly also is actually a reflection of the strength of the products and services in Cambodia. That generally loan appraisal is done well. That there is a reasonable matching of cash flow and repayment terms to people's capacity. So I mean I gave the example of the end of term loan. That in itself is a huge improvement on if you look at the sort of Andhra Pradesh weekly repayments type loans, which are given to farmers sometimes. There's a huge mismatch between capacity and loans. But having said that, there's a risk in the market, particularly coming from multiple lending and over-indebtedness. The Credit Bureau was launched a couple of years ago and has highlighted quite high levels of multiple lending. The challenge here is multiple lending being driven by loan sizes that are too small for people's capacity? Is multiple lending a reflection of customer need, or is it a reflection of poor practice in terms of the microfinance organisations? So at the moment, bad debt is very low. Multiple lending is significant. So these are all questions. I think AMK is interesting in terms of how they are responding to this. It's very difficult to be one organisation in a sector, and you can respond individually, but you can't necessarily affect the actions of your competitors. So at AMK, for example, always had a policy not to allow clients to take multiple loans. So if they found that a client had a loan with another organisation, they wouldn't lend to them. And this is certainly one of the factors behind the low levels of bad debt. But with the Credit Bureau, that data became much stronger, and the levels of multiple lending were becoming much more apparent. And they realised that something like a third of the clients had a loan with another organisation, and AMK was ending up rejecting huge numbers of clients or potential clients. So they've responded to that by the sense that it's better for a client to borrow more with AMK, where AMK is doing a robust loan appraisal and cash flow analysis and home visit, than to reject the client who then takes multiple loans from other organisations. So they've recently introduced what they call an internal multiple lending approach, which my understanding seems to be working, but it's still fairly early days. So I'm not sure if I've completely answered your question, but I think I've answered it in a sort of slightly wider way than you asked it.
Great, thank you, Anton. And we have, as a final question, from Mary Njoroge. She's from Kenya. When the poor become less poor and they feel they have outgrown the services being offered by a microfinance or savings group, is it prudent for the microfinance institution to move to another level of a fully fledged bank, and what impact does that have on the core of its clients?
So good question. I think it comes back to Malcolm's question. I think there are two different models for that. I think some organisations seek to graduate clients on from their services. I think particularly that you talk about savings groups. I think particularly where you're talking about community-based financial services, the ability of those groups to sort of develop into more extensive financial service providers is more limited. I think there's a risk for organisations that do try to grow with their clients and do try to do more things, that they move away from their core clients, and that's really been the challenge, and that's been the tension for AMK. I think if you look at the microfinance market in Cambodia, if you look at most microfinance markets, there is a general movement away from poorer people and a gradual movement up market. So in Cambodia now, most of the microfinance organisations have moved from group lending to individual lending, or certainly they're still doing group lending, but all their emphasis is on the individual loans. They are all trying to mobilise savings from the middle income people in the towns, and they're busy building very nice branches and branch offices. And that really creates a momentum away from that core clientele. I think for AMK, what's been interesting is that this risk of change in the institution has been very much at the fore of their thinking. It's been very much part of the board decisions, and they are trying to balance the agent banking with the branch savings. And for example, the board in this process rejected the management call for rolling out more ATMs and said you need to focus your resources in the next year on the agent banking rather than rolling out the ATMs. So this is a tension. I think what's interesting and exciting about microfinance, about social business in general, is this tension between the commercial and the social, and trying to find that sweet spot and recognizing where there isn't a sweet spot and where your focus on your intention needs to be at the fore, and you need to make some difficult decisions where things may not be commercially attractive. And yeah, so I think I'll leave that there.
Okay, thanks so much, Anton. We'll have one last question from one of our students in the classroom, from Aruna Sharma, and she's actually from nearby here in Massachusetts. Aruna?
Hi, it's great to hear from you and about the book. I have a question about hierarchy. You mentioned that one of the effective way of running an organization in Cambodia was eliminating the hierarchy. Was it among the employees? Was there any negative effect of it? Because there was one issue in an organization that I worked before, that eliminating hierarchy kind of created a little bit of chaos because they did not know their boundaries, and they would not listen to their superiors and that whatnot. I'm just curious about how did it work in Cambodia. Thanks.
Okay. So let me answer that in a number of ways. I think the starting point was that AMK wasn't an organization that was set up by a charismatic visionary leader who sort of was the person that everybody deferred to. It was started by a very competent CEO, but very much he sought to build an organization where there were teams. So he sought to strengthen the team around him at a management level. They had an HR manager who really came in with this vision of trying to seeing the strength of the organization as coming from the staff and how to build up that team. So certainly I wouldn't characterize AMK as having no hierarchy. It's about creating a meritocracy. It's about creating a sense where you are not entitled to be right because of your position in the organization. You have to earn your value. So AMK has a traditional management structure. The CEO has set up. There's now a C-suite of a CFO, a CEO, a COO, a chief business officer, and a chief information officer. So there's there's that management level team, and then there's heads of department, and so there very much is a hierarchy and a management structure. But what AMK has done is broken down the boundaries in terms of people being able to talk to each other and communicate with each other. I think that's the key thing. So it's not that you just do what you want to do and you don't listen to your superior, but you don't just follow orders blindly. You are entitled to ask questions and to give opinions and to give feedback.
That's great. Well, Anton, this has really been a pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time to answer the questions and give an excellent presentation on the book. I wish you luck with book sales. As you were talking with Malcolm earlier, it's a challenge to get the word out there, so we're doing our part to help do that. We'll have this webinar up on our website for anybody to listen to afterwards, and encourage everybody to go out and buy this book, because it is, as Anton has pointed out, this is really kind of a blueprint for how to build strong organizations, whether it be microfinance or else, where these are principles that are universal and can be applied to really make organizations participatory and really effective in terms of trying to solve problems and do what Malcolm and Muhammad Yunus say, is put poverty in a museum. I don't know if that's exactly what Malcolm was saying, but I think that essentially saying is we can look at a world where poverty is slowly or even quickly decreasing if we can just have effective organizations that decreasing. Did I say decreasing? Okay. I said decreasing. I think I said that. We'll play back the tape. But in any event, thank you so much, Anton. We appreciate you taking the time. Wish you all the luck with the book, and I appreciate everyone out there listening, and encourage you to come back for future SMDP webinars. Have a good day, and thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Bill, can I just add one thing? Just
We're still
to say
recording.
that the book is available in some 40 countries, not just through Amazon. Practical Action has very good distribution. So if you go onto the website, thebusinessofdoinggood.co.uk, there's a list of local distributors that people can buy the book through.
Okay, and those links that are there on the screen right now, we will also put that link up on the website. So if people want to click on that before they listen or after they listen, it will be right there. All right, well, thanks again, Anton, and have a great day, and stay in touch.
Pleasure, thanks.